Welcome to Somnia Lore.
Sometimes, late at night, I think about a man who once destroyed his own universe, not out of anger, but out of a love too large for one world to hold. His name drifts somewhere between dream and silence now, but once, long ago, it was whispered with awe, Rick. The name trembled like starlight caught in glass, fragile and infinite. He was a boy before he was a myth, small enough to fit beneath the folds of the sky, staring upward as though he were remembering something the rest of us forgot. He was born on an ordinary night. The rain fell in slow, thoughtful patterns as if the clouds themselves were thinking. His mother said the first sound he made wasn't a cry, but a hum, low, deep, almost melodic, as though the child was echoing back the frequency of the universe. People often forget that genius begins in wonder, not logic. Even as a child, Rick would pause in the middle of sentences to listen to something only he could hear. He'd tilt his head slightly, eyes squinting as if decoding the rhythm of air itself. There were times when his teachers mistook silence for arrogance. "You think in galaxies, Rick," one of them once told him, half admiring, half afraid. "But you feel in whispers." He didn't know what she meant then, but the words stayed, hovering in his mind like dust caught in a sunbeam. In later years, when the sound of laughter felt distant, he'd hear that voice again. And it would sting like nostalgia, pretending to be advice. In his small bedroom, cluttered with wires, light bulbs, and unfinished ideas, the boy who would, one day, tear space apart, spent his nights trying to build something no one had asked for, a bridge between feeling and knowing. He didn't want power. He wanted understanding. Sometimes, lying beneath a thin blanket, he'd whisper into the dark, "If I could just remember what it felt like before all this, maybe I'd finally sleep." He grew up beneath skies that never stopped moving. Clouds rolled like thoughts he couldn't quiet. Each morning, he'd watch sunlight spill over the world and feel both wonder and distance. He saw the beauty of things, but he also saw their equations. How everything that shines eventually fades, how every sound eventually dissolves into quiet. His first heartbreak wasn't a person, it was the moment he realized stars burn out even when they still look alive. But for all his brilliance, he wasn't cold. He loved deeply. Too deeply, maybe. When his little sister cried, he'd stay beside her until dawn, drawing shapes in the air, inventing stories about galaxies where no one ever grew old. "Someday," he'd tell her softly, "I'll build you a world where sadness can't find us." She'd smile sleepily, believing him because when he said it, it almost sounded true. As years slipped by, Rick learned that genius is both gift and weight. He could make atoms dance, but he couldn't make people stay. He'd listen to his parents argue through thin walls and imagine equations that could fix them. He never realized some things can only be healed by time, and even time needs rest. One night, when he was barely 15, he climbed onto the roof of his house and sat staring at the sky. The stars seemed closer that evening, like they'd bent down just to hear him think. He spoke softly, the way someone confides in a friend who isn't really there. "If you can hear me," he said to the stars, "tell me what I'm supposed to do with all this." Knowing. The stars didn't answer, but a faint wind brushed his face, cool and steady, as if reminding him that even silence can hold love. And before we drift deeper into his story, we want you to know we truly love and care for you. You're safe here, wherever you are. This story was made to keep you company while the world grows quiet around you. So, before we continue, tell me, where in the world are you listening from?
And what time is it there? Take a breath.
Let it all slow down. Now, let's go on. Rick's childhood passed like the turning of distant planets. Slow, inevitable, quietly bright. The world didn't understand him, and maybe it never could. But there was one place where everything seemed to make sense. The small shed behind his home, where broken radios whispered and unfinished machines sighed in sleep. There, the air shimmered with the hum of half-born inventions. Sometimes he'd close his eyes and imagine the universe folding gently in on itself, like paper ready for a letter. He didn't yet know he'd spend a lifetime writing to himself through different worlds. On the night of his 17th birthday, he built his first portal, not to escape, but to listen. He wanted to know if anyone, anywhere, felt the same hum that kept him awake at night. The machine flickered to life like a heartbeat, pale blue light trembling through the dark. And when the air split open, he heard it. Laughter. His laughter, but not his. Older, sadder, full of the kind of ache that only comes after love and loss. He stood frozen, the glow painting his face like moonlight over still water. For the first time, he understood what infinity really meant. Not endlessness, but repetition. Every choice, every failure, every tenderness looping through forever. He closed the portal quietly, heart trembling, and whispered to no one, "Maybe we're all just echoes trying to remember the first sound." That night, he didn't sleep. He sat by the window until dawn, watching the horizon turn from blue to gold. The hum inside him was softer now, like it had settled into something almost peaceful. Maybe that was the beginning, not of invention, but of remembrance. The boy, who saw equations in light, who spoke to stars and silence alike, began to understand that genius isn't about answers. It's about staying awake long enough to listen. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees, carrying the scent of rain. Somewhere in the distance, thunder murmured. Not warning, but comfort. The world was vast, and he was small, but in that smallness there was something infinite. Rick closed his eyes, breathing slow, the sound of his heartbeat mingling with the soft hum of everything. And for a moment, he wasn't trying to solve the universe. He was simply part of it. Morning arrived softly, spilling gold across the cluttered desk where equations slept beneath scraps of paper. Rick sat still, watching light crawl through the glass like it had something to say. His hands were stained with ink, fingertips smudged from the night's work. The machine in the corner still hummed faintly, as though remembering its own heartbeat. He had closed the portal hours ago, but its echo lingered, the faint aftertaste of something impossible and deeply personal. The air smelled faintly of ozone and rain. It felt like the morning after a secret. He turned his head slightly and listened. The world outside was waking, birds stitching songs through the silence, leaves whispering against the window. He thought about the laughter he'd heard through the portal, the way it carried both pain and peace. His older self, his possible self. The sound had unsettled him, but not in the way fear unsettles. It was more like a memory resurfacing too soon. He wondered if every version of him was destined to search for the same voice, forever listening through different skies. He went downstairs, barefoot, the wooden steps creaking beneath his weight. His mother was already in the kitchen, her movements slow, careful, the rhythm of someone who'd grown used to mornings that didn't wait for joy. The smell of coffee filled the room. She looked at him briefly, then smiled, tired but kind.
"Up all night again?" she asked, pouring a cup and sliding it toward him. He nodded, taking the mug between both hands. I think I heard something last night, he said quietly. She raised an eyebrow. The universe talking back? He smiled faintly, unsure if she was teasing or believing.
Maybe, he murmured. Maybe just myself. She studied him for a moment, then said softly, Rick, not every mystery needs solving. Some just need living. He didn't answer, but the words lodged somewhere deep in the quiet part of his chest where wisdom tends to hide. He drank his coffee slowly, eyes drifting toward the window. The sky was pale, washed-out blue, a blank page waiting for meaning. At school, the world felt smaller. His classmates talked about parties, exams, who liked whom. Simple orbits of everyday life. Rick moved among them like a ghost of another frequency. He wanted to care, but his mind was elsewhere, tracing invisible threads between thoughts, feelings, stars. The teacher spoke of gravity and motion, but Rick was already lost in the idea that love might obey similar laws, invisible forces pulling hearts together, breaking them apart, each connection leaving its mark in time. During lunch, he sat alone beneath a tree, sketching in his notebook. Not equations this time, but faces. Dozens of them, all half-remembered. He realized some belonged to dreams, others to versions of people who never existed. A gust of wind flipped the pages, scattering pencil shavings across the ground. He laughed softly to himself. The sound startled him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd heard it without irony. A girl approached him then, carrying a small sandwich wrapped in foil. Her hair caught the sunlight like quiet fire. "You always forget to eat," she said, placing it beside him. He blinked, caught off guard. Her name was Clara. Quiet, observant, the kind of person who noticed the silence others missed.
Thanks, he said, almost embarrassed.
She sat beside him, not asking questions. They ate in silence, a comfortable one, like two stars resting in the same orbit. After a while, she looked at his sketches.
They look sad, she said gently.
Do you ever draw something happy? He paused, pencil still in hand.
I'm not sure I know what that looks like, he said.
She smiled faintly.
Maybe that's why you keep drawing. Her tone wasn't mocking.
It was soft, like she understood something he didn't. That afternoon, clouds rolled in, slow and heavy. The air thickened with the promise of rain. Rick walked home alone, his mind replaying the sound of her voice. There was something grounding in it, something that made the chaos in his head pause. He wondered if this too was gravity, not of science, but of soul. When he reached his house, he went straight to the shed. The hum had faded now, the portal dormant. He sat beside it, notebook on his lap, and wrote not formulas, but words.
What if every version of me is just trying to find the same moment of peace?
He stared at the sentence until it blurred. Then he added, maybe that's what love is? The only equation that doesn't need solving? He stayed there for hours, rain tapping softly on the roof. The smell of wet earth filling the air. The sound reminded him of his sister's laughter, long gone now to time and memory. He missed her more in moments like this, when the world felt close enough to touch, but too vast to understand. He whispered to the rain, I'll find you again, somewhere. It wasn't a promise, just a wish folded into sound. As twilight crept in, Clara appeared at the doorway, holding an umbrella.
Your mom said you'd be out here, she said, stepping inside.
Her eyes moved over the machine, the papers, the flicker of light still clinging to the edges of invention. Does it work? She asked softly. Rick looked up, tired but honest. It did. But I think it wasn't supposed to. She sat beside him, watching the quiet hum between worlds. Maybe it's not about what it does, she said. Maybe it's about what it shows you. He looked at her, uncertain how she always found words that fit. She met his gaze with calm assurance.
You keep listening, she said.
That's rare. The rain outside grew heavier, a steady rhythm against the tin roof. Rick leaned back, eyes half closed. Do you ever feel like you've already lived something before? He asked. She smiled faintly. Maybe we dream before we live. Maybe that's why déjà vu feels so sad. Her voice carried through the air like music. Soft, measured, belonging to the kind of night that never fully ends. When she left, he watched her walk through the rain until she disappeared into silver mist. The world grew quieter again, but not lonely this time. The portal pulsed once, faint and blue, as if echoing her departure. Rick closed his notebook and whispered to the machine, "Not tonight. Tonight I'll just remember." Later, as he lay in bed, the hum returned. Softer, slower, almost human. He didn't try to understand it. He simply listened. Outside, the storm faded into calm. The night sighed, long and deep, and for the first time in years, Rick felt small enough to rest. The next morning arrived in pale light, thin and fragile as paper. Rick woke before dawn, lying still beneath the faint hum that lived somewhere between his thoughts. His room smelled of metal and rain, as if the storm from the night before had slipped through the walls to stay with him. He stared at the ceiling, tracing cracks that looked like constellations, tiny fractures that mapped out the shape of everything he'd yet to understand. His body was tired, but his mind drifted restlessly toward the shed. Something about the portal's fading light had changed the air, like the universe had exhaled through his roof and forgotten to take it back. He sat up slowly, running a hand through his tangled hair. For a moment he tried to hold on to the quiet. Then curiosity, gentle but persistent, pulled him from bed. Downstairs the house slept. His mother's soft breathing echoed through the hall, steady and comforting like an anchor he was too afraid to touch. He left without breakfast, the floor cold beneath his feet, and crossed the backyard as fog began to rise from the grass. The shed door creaked when he opened it.
Inside, the machine sat in stillness, wires coiled like veins around its center.
The light within it pulsed faintly, no longer blue, but something closer to silver. Soft, breathing, alive. He crouched beside it and placed his hand against the metal. It was warm. For a brief second, the hum matched his pulse. Then the light flickered out, leaving only the sound of morning outside, wind moving through wet leaves, a distant bird testing the edge of song. Rick sat back on his heels and closed his eyes. He could almost hear it again, the laughter from the other side, his older voice echoing through time. It wasn't mocking. It was weary, gentle, full of something like forgiveness. He thought about that tone, the way it carried ache without despair. Maybe the man he would become had learned something he hadn't yet grasped. Maybe all pain softened eventually, if you lived long enough to listen to it differently. When he opened his eyes, sunlight had begun to leak through the cracks in the wood, filling the room with dust that shimmered like quiet stars. He whispered, "Are you still there?" The machine didn't answer, but the silence felt aware, as if the world itself was pausing to breathe beside him. He stayed there for a long time, letting stillness wash over him until it began to feel like company. By afternoon, the air had turned warm. Rick sat outside on the steps of the shed, notebook open, but the page remained blank. His thoughts drifted to Clara, the way she spoke as though she'd seen through the noise of things. There was something different about her presence, something steadying. He wanted to ask how she managed to stay so calm in a world that kept changing shape. He wondered if she'd come by again, though he didn't dare hope too loudly. The day stretched, unhurried. He spent it helping his mother fix an old radio, its dial cracked, its wires frayed from time. She hummed softly while he worked, a tune that made him feel young again, though he didn't remember ever hearing it before. When the signal finally caught, the voice on the other end spoke about weather and roads and the ordinary passing of things. But beneath it, faintly, There was static that almost sounded like the same frequency from his machine. A quiet reminder that the universe had layers, some tender, some cruel, all connected by sound. That night, after dinner, the stars came out clear. The storm had washed the sky clean. He sat on the roof again, legs crossed, watching the world fall into blue. The air was cool, wrapped in the scent of wet soil and fading heat. He spoke softly, unsure who he was speaking to. "If you're out there, the other me, did you ever find peace?" His voice drifted upward, carried by air that didn't promise answers. Or did you build another machine just to forget why you needed one? A flicker of motion caught his eye. Down below, a faint light glowed near the edge of the shed. Not from the portal, but from something else entirely. He climbed down carefully, curiosity tightening his chest. The glow came from a small glass jar resting on the grass, filled with what looked like fireflies. But when he picked it up, he realized there were no insects inside, only fragments of luminescent dust swirling like slow breath. A note was taped to the lid in handwriting that wasn't his. "For when you forget what silence sounds like." He turned the jar in his hands, the light shifting like thought. His pulse quickened, not from fear, but recognition. The handwriting was eerily familiar, as if written by someone who had studied his own for years. He looked around, but the yard was empty.
Only the wind moved.
He whispered, "Clara." But her name dissolved into the dark. He carried the jar inside and set it on his desk. The light within it faded and brightened in rhythm with his breathing. He sat back, staring, feeling an ache that was both wonder and sorrow. Perhaps the universe wasn't infinite distance, but infinite echoes, each version of him leaving small gifts for the others, reminders that no one ever truly walks alone, not even through time. Hours passed. The jar glowed softly in the dark, painting his walls in shifting silver. He thought about his mother's voice, about Clara's eyes, about the laughter from beyond the portal. Each memory felt like a note in some unfinished lullaby. The hum returned faintly, not from the machine but from within him. It no longer felt haunting. It felt like home, he whispered into the stillness. Maybe the point isn't to find the answer.
Maybe it's just to stay kind while you search. The jar pulsed once, almost like agreement.
He smiled, a small, tired curve of the mouth. The night seemed to sigh with him, patient and wide. Lying back on his bed, he watched the glow paint faint constellations across the ceiling. Somewhere beyond walls and breath, another version of him might be doing the same. Both of them suspended in their own small silences, both dreaming of each other through the folds of time. And before sleep took him, Rick thought he heard it again. That soft, familiar laughter, no longer distant, no longer strange. It sounded like forgiveness disguised as memory, a quiet echo reaching across the dark to say, "Rest now." Days unfolded in quiet rhythm, like waves folding over one another. Rick moved through them gently, each hour blending into the next, the way soft rain melts into soil. The jar still sat on his desk, its silver light faint but alive, pulsing with the steadiness of a slow heartbeat. Sometimes at night, he'd watch it glow until his eyelids grew heavy, imagining it was the memory of another self keeping him company. He never figured out where it came from, but he didn't need to. Some mysteries, he was learning, exist to comfort, not to solve. Clara visited often now. She'd knock twice, once light, once firm, and wait for him to open the shed door. Sometimes she brought a book, sometimes silence. They'd sit side by side, legs stretched out, the hum of the machine between them like a third presence neither of them named. She wasn't afraid of his world. She moved through it as if she'd always belonged there, her calm unshaken by wires, sparks, or strange equations curling across the floor in chalk. One afternoon, she found him working on something small. Not a portal, but a recorder shaped like a glass sphere. "What's it for?" she asked, crouching beside him. He smiled faintly, not looking up. "It listens to moments," he said.
"What sounds, moments?"
"The quiet ones that get lost when people stop paying attention." She tilted her head, watching as he held the sphere to his ear. "Does it work?" He shrugged. "It depends on what you expect to hear." She reached out, resting her hand over his.
"Then maybe don't listen for anything," she said. "Just
"Listen." Her voice was so soft that the air seemed to pause to catch it. He closed his eyes, following her advice. For a brief second, the world felt still, like a held breath. And in that stillness there was something, not sound, not thought, but a feeling that shimmered between them. When he opened his eyes again, she was smiling, and he realized that some silences are not empty, but full. They began walking together in the evenings, through fields that stretched beyond the neighborhood's edge. The world was different there, wider, slower, painted in gold by the dying sun. Clara would talk about small things, how the air felt lighter before rain, how flowers leaned toward laughter, how loneliness wasn't always a curse, but sometimes a kind of promise. Rick listened, rarely speaking, his mind mapping every word she gave him like coordinates to something sacred. One night, as the horizon bled orange into indigo, she stopped and turned toward him. "You always look like you're thinking about 100 things," she said. He smiled faintly. "Maybe I am. And none of them are here," she replied. Her tone wasn't cruel, and it was sad, tender. "You look at the stars, but you forget to look at the hands holding yours." He hesitated, the weight of her words sinking slowly.
"I'm trying," he said after a while.
"Sometimes the universe feels louder than my own life." She nodded, her eyes kind. "Then let it be loud," she said. "Just don't let it drown you." They stood there for a long time, silence pressing gently around them. When the first star appeared, Rick found himself saying, "Do you think people can exist in more than one place at once?"
"Not physically, but in feeling?"
Clara smiled. "I think we already do. Every time you remember someone, a part of you lives where they are." Her answer lingered in his mind long after they parted that night. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the jar's light washing over him like quiet moonlight. Maybe that was what he'd been doing all along, building ways to live in every memory he couldn't let go of. The thought didn't sadden him this time. It softened him. There was something beautiful about the idea that connection could stretch beyond time, that maybe every version of him was just trying to hold on to a single, infinite moment of care. The next morning, the world was silver and still. Mist hung low over the fields. He found Clara sitting outside the shed, waiting, sketchbook in her lap.
"I drew you something," she said, turning it around.
It was a picture of him, or at least a feeling of him, his outline blurred into a horizon of stars, one hand reaching towards something unseen. The caption beneath read, "He listens even when no one speaks." He laughed quietly, a sound like wind through leaves. "It's beautiful," he said.
"It's you," she replied, closing the book.
Then softer. "You don't have to keep building things just to find meaning, you know. Sometimes you just have to let life stand still long enough to hear it breathing." He wanted to tell her that he didn't know how to stop, that motion had become his language. That stillness scared him because it made him feel visible. But instead he nodded, and they sat together until the mist began to lift. Weeks passed like that, days filled with quiet work, nights laced with her laughter. He began to feel the edges of his world soften. The ache that used to hum beneath his ribs started to quiet, replaced by something gentler, something like belonging. Yet, every so often, the machine in the shed would pulse faintly in his sleep, as though the universe itself refused to be forgotten. One evening, he found Clara standing beside it, her reflection trembling in the dim silver light.
"You've kept it alive," she whispered.
"Even when you said you'd stopped." He stepped closer. "Maybe it's keeping me alive." She turned to face him, eyes steady. Then promise me you'll know when to let go. He hesitated, unsure if he could make such a promise. The hum filled the space between them, low and rhythmic, like a heartbeat stretched through eternity. For a moment, they stood in that glow. Two silhouettes framed by invention and fate. Then she reached out, touched his arm, and smiled sadly. "Whatever you're searching for," she said, "I hope it finds you softly." After she left, Rick stood alone, watching the jar's light flicker on his desk, the machine's pulse steady in the dark. Outside, the stars were beginning to bloom again, bright and unbothered. He whispered into the stillness, "I'm trying." The air seemed to listen. The jar glowed once, faintly, as though it believed him. And somewhere, far off, another version of him might have smiled, knowing that for the first time, the boy who once built portals to escape had finally built one that led inward, toward peace. Morning arrived without warning, carried in by the hush of mist and the muted trill of distant birds. Rick stirred in the dimness, half dreaming, half awake. The silver jar's glow was softer now, as though it had grown tired of being constant. For a long moment he lay there, staring at the faint light against the wall. It reminded him of something slipping, a thread loosened from the weave. The air had that quiet stillness that follows change, though nothing yet had changed. He rose, walked barefoot across the wooden floor, and opened the shed door. The air outside was cool, tinged with dew and the scent of wet grass. Beyond the fields, the world seemed wrapped in a thin veil of fog, making every shape appear uncertain, almost half-remembered. Clara wasn't there that morning, though she'd said she might come by. Her absence left an ache that settled deep in his chest, not sharp, but hollow, like the echo of something long understood, but never said aloud. Inside, the machine's hum had shifted. It was quieter, less steady, as if exhaling rather than breathing. Rick placed a hand on its surface, warm, trembling faintly. He'd begun to think of it less as a creation and more as a mirror. It reflected what he felt, what he feared, what he refused to name. Now it seemed to reflect uncertainty. He adjusted a dial, then stopped. The urge to fix things had always been his first instinct, but today he simply listened. Hours passed. The fog thinned. Still, Clara didn't come. He found himself wandering along the path that led to her cottage, a narrow trail through reeds that whispered with every step. The sky hung heavy and pale. When he reached her porch, he hesitated. The door was ajar. He knocked once. No answer. Inside, the air was cool and still, the faint scent of lavender lingering. A teacup sat half full on the table, a book open beside it. The page was marked by a pressed violet, brittle now. He called her name softly, but the house did not respond. Outside, the wind began to stir, brushing through the trees. On the windowsill, he noticed a note folded neatly beneath a stone. His fingers trembled as he lifted it. The handwriting was hers. Gentle, looping. "Rick," it read. "If you're reading this, it means I've gone where I needed to go."
Not far, not really.
You've spent so long searching for meaning in the noise.
I think you already found it, but you're afraid to believe it's real. Don't look for me.
Look for what I left behind. There was no signature, just a small drawing of a jar, its light spilling outward like dawn breaking through clouds. He stood there for a long time, the paper shaking in his hands. A low sound built in his throat, not quite grief, not quite understanding. He folded the note, slipped it into his pocket, and stepped outside. The wind had grown stronger now, scattering petals across the path like fragments of memory. Back in his shed, the machine's hum had deepened. The silver jar pulsed irregularly, as though echoing his heartbeat. He sat beside it, the note still in his hand, and whispered, "Where did you go?" The jar flickered once, twice, then steadied, brighter than before. It cast long shadows on the walls, shapes that moved like ghosts in quiet conversation. He watched them, wondering if one of them might be hers. As dusk settled, a faint resonance began to fill the air. Not a sound, but a vibration. The machine stirred to life on its own, dials shifting, gears aligning with purpose. Rick didn't move. He'd built it, yes, but it had grown beyond him, responding to something he couldn't touch. The glow expanded until it filled the room with liquid light. The air trembled. Then came the faintest whisper. Or maybe it was memory, carrying Clara's voice. "Let it open." He froze. The words were unmistakable. His pulse quickened. "Clara," he said, though the name came out like a breath. The light responded, a ripple, gentle, inviting. He stood, every instinct at war with every fear. For years, he'd opened doors to everywhere but himself.
Maybe this was what she meant.
Maybe this was what she left behind. Slowly, he reached toward the machine. The surface shimmered beneath his touch, liquid and solid all at once. For a moment, everything inside him fell quiet. The questions, the ache, the guilt. The world tilted soft and luminous. Then the light drew him forward. He didn't fall. He drifted. Through the shimmer of it all, stars folding inward, voices overlapping like echoes through water. There were images, a field of gold beneath an endless sky, laughter, a hand reaching through fog. Clara's silhouette appeared just ahead, her hair catching light that wasn't sunlight. She turned, smiling, her eyes filled with calm. "Why did you leave?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I didn't," she said, stepping closer. "You just had to see that I was never gone." He wanted to reach for her, but she shook her head gently.
"You built bridges between worlds," she said.
"Now you have to learn to live in one." "I don't know how," he whispered. "Yes, you do," she said softly. "You've already started." Her form began to blur, dissolving into light. Panic sparked in him, but she raised a hand. Not to stop him, but to comfort. "This isn't an ending, Rick. It's what happens when you finally stop running." The light expanded again, swallowing the edges of everything. He felt warmth, a deep, quiet warmth that filled the spaces inside him he didn't know were empty. Then, silence. When he opened his eyes, he was back in the shed. The jar sat on the desk, its glow gone, not extinguished but absorbed, as though it had found rest. The machine was still.
Outside, the dawn had begun again, soft and gold, painting the fields in slow light. Rick stood there, breathing, listening to the world exhale.
The air was heavy with peace, fragile, real. He touched the jar one last time. "Thank you," he whispered. Then he stepped outside, into the brightness, and for the first time in his life, he did not look back. The days after felt weightless, as if the air itself had grown softer, kinder to his lungs. Rick moved through the quiet spaces of his small world with a gentleness he hadn't known before. He no longer hurried to the shed each morning. He no longer sought answers from the humming machine or waited for Clara's voice to return from the ether. He simply was present, awake, and strangely calm. Still, every evening, as the sun stretched long shadows across the fields, he found himself sitting on the porch, staring at the horizon where the light faded slow as thought. The jar sat beside him, dull and still, its glow now only memory. He often wondered if it had truly gone out, or if he had simply learned to see its light elsewhere, in the way the wind rippled through the grass, in the steady rhythm of his own heart. Night, as the stars began to blink alive, a soft tapping echoed from somewhere near the door. It wasn't sharp or hurried, more like the hesitant rhythm of a bird brushing against glass. He rose, heart caught between curiosity and familiarity. and found a small envelope slipped beneath the threshold. His name was written across it in ink that shimmered faintly, as though it had been touched by starlight. Inside was a single piece of paper.
Unlined, empty, except for one phrase. Come to the lake. He knew which lake it meant.
There was only one in this part of the valley, a still body of water that mirrored the sky so perfectly that people said it had no depth at all, only reflection. He hadn't been there in years, not since before Clara arrived. Something inside him stirred, not fear, not hope, but a quiet pull, like the gravity of memory. By the time he reached the lake, the moon had risen high, pale and vast. The water was still, untouched, holding the sky like a secret. The air carried the faint scent of cedar and distant rain. He stepped closer, the damp earth giving beneath his boots. There was no one there, only the whisper of reeds and the sigh of the wind across the surface. Then he saw it, something small, floating near the shore. A second jar, faintly glowing, drifting like a lantern on the skin of the water. The light inside was softer than he remembered, almost trembling. For a moment, he thought it was his own, the same silver pulse, but as he reached into the cold water and lifted it free, he saw that this one held a color he had never seen before. It was a deep blue, like twilight caught in glass. He held it against his chest, and the light flickered in rhythm with his heartbeat. The sensation wasn't electric this time. It was warm, human, full of memory. He could almost feel Clara's presence, not beside him, but within the calm around him. The lake shimmered faintly, and for a brief, impossible instant, he saw her reflection beside his own in the water. She was smiling, though her lips didn't move. The smile was quiet understanding. Rick sank to his knees at the edge of the lake. The weight of everything, the years, the running, the invention, the loss, settled inside him like sediment in still water. He whispered her name once, and the sound disappeared into the night. Then he closed his eyes. The light from the jar began to spread, not outward, but inward, seeping into his skin like warmth after long cold. He remembered her voice. "You've already started."
Maybe this was what she meant.
Maybe love, once given, doesn't vanish. It changes form. When he opened his eyes again, the lake was still, but the world seemed altered. The trees leaned closer, the stars felt lower, and everything glowed with the faint shimmer of recognition. He realized then that the second jar wasn't new. It had always been here, waiting for him to be still enough to notice. He stayed there until dawn. The light of morning crept slow across the surface of the water, scattering silver over blue. When the sun rose high enough to warm his face, Rick stood, jar in hand. The blue light had faded, leaving only glass. He placed it gently at the water's edge, letting the waves touch it once before they carried it away. The walk home was quiet. The valley seemed to breathe with him. Every sound, the rustle of branches, the hum of insects, the distant call of a bird, felt like part of a larger conversation he'd forgotten how to listen to. For years he'd thought understanding the universe meant unraveling its laws. Now he began to see that maybe it meant surrendering to them. By the time he reached his shed, the sky had turned a washed gold. He stepped inside, half expecting the silence to feel heavy again, but it didn't. It felt alive. The machine still sat there, dormant, its surface layered with dust and time. He didn't touch it. He only looked at it, and for the first time he smiled. He spoke softly, almost as if to an old friend. "We did what we could." His voice broke slightly, but it wasn't sorrow, it was release. That night, he built a fire in the clearing behind his home. The flames rose gently, reflecting in his eyes. He placed the first jar, the one that had started it all, at the edge of the firelight. It didn't glow anymore, yet even in its stillness, it seemed alive, holding every echo of what had come before. He whispered a small thank you to the stars, to the quiet, to Clara, to himself. Then he leaned back against the grass and watched the embers drift upward like tiny red planets. The night sky was vast, patient, endless. Somewhere in that great hush between heartbeats, he thought he heard her again. Not as a voice, not even as a sound, just a feeling, a warmth that said, "You're home now." He closed his eyes, letting the world fade into that soft rhythm. The fire crackled low. The grass swayed in the breeze. The stars pulsed faintly overhead, steady as breathing, and for the first time in all his long, restless searching, Rick fell asleep without dreaming, held by the quiet promise that he didn't need to wake to find what he had been looking for. The following morning came wrapped in a tender hush, as if the world itself was reluctant to disturb him. Rick awoke with sunlight resting gently on his face, thin and golden through the window. For the first time in years, his dreams had been silent. No echoes, no equations, no fractured memories of the universe unfolding and collapsing. Only peace, like drifting in warm water. He sat up slowly, his joints creaking like old wood, and realized that the stillness didn't feel empty anymore. It felt whole. The smell of the fire lingered faintly in the air, mixed with the damp sweetness of dawn. Outside, the fields glistened with dew, each blade of grass carrying a small glimmer of the morning sun. The world looked softer now, as though it had forgiven him for something. Or perhaps, he thought, he had finally forgiven himself. He made tea the old way, kettle on the stove, no science, no shortcuts. The whistle rose like a memory of a simpler time. As he poured the steaming water into his cup, he caught his reflection in the window. Thinner, older, but clearer somehow. The man staring back wasn't the restless architect of impossible machines anymore. He was just Rick, and that, he realized, was enough. After breakfast, he stepped outside with his cup and walked toward the ridge overlooking the valley. The path wound through soft earth and wildflowers, their petals trembling in the faint breeze. Below, the river traced its silver arc through the fields, catching light in flashes that reminded him of the jar, that living shimmer that once kept him tethered to something he couldn't name. He sat on a flat stone and watched the horizon. The sky was wide and clouds drifted slow like thoughts too kind to interrupt. Somewhere in that distance, a faint hum began to rise. A low, familiar vibration that seemed to come not from the earth, but from within him. It wasn't the machine. It wasn't the jar. It was quieter, deeper, more human. He closed his eyes. For a moment he saw flashes. The machine's glow, Clara's reflection, the lake rippling beneath moonlight. Then, like threads drawn together, those images softened into one. The feeling that followed wasn't revelation. It was belonging. A rustle behind him drew him back. He turned, expecting emptiness, but found a boy standing there, no older than 12, barefoot, eyes bright with the kind of wonder Rick thought he'd long forgotten. The boy didn't look afraid. He held something in his hand, a small piece of glass that caught the light and scattered it like rain. Rick blinked, unsure if the boy was real or some trick of morning haze. "You're early," the boy said, smiling. His voice carried an echo, gentle and strange, as though it came from several places at once. "Early for what?" Rick asked. The boy shrugged, crouching to pick a blade of grass. "For remembering," Rick's chest tightened.
Who are you?
The boy studied him for a long moment before answering. "You already know. You just haven't looked long enough." Something inside Rick shifted. The boy's eyes, clear, light-filled, mirrored his own, not as they were now, but as they once were. His breath caught.
You're
He couldn't finish. The boy smiled again.
a piece of what you left behind. He set the glass fragment on the ground between them.
It pulsed faintly as though alive. You buried too many things in your head, Rick, but not everything stays buried. The light in the glass began to spread across the grass in delicate ripples. For a heartbeat, Rick thought he saw shapes within it, moments suspended in liquid light. The day he first held the jar, the look on Clara's face when she laughed without warning, the trembling hands of a man building something he didn't understand but couldn't let go of. The boy stood, brushing dust from his knees.
It's not about fixing anymore, he said softly. It's about remembering without needing to change what comes next. Rick swallowed hard. And what does come next?
The boy tilted his head toward the horizon. Rest. And maybe, if you're quiet enough, joy. When Rick looked again, the boy was gone. No sound of footsteps, no trace but the glass, which had stopped glowing. Only the wind moved, whispering through the grass. He picked up the fragment, feeling its warmth fade in his palm. Then he smiled, just slightly, and tucked it into his coat pocket. By the time he returned to the cottage, the sun was high and the air had begun to hum with the life of the day. Birds called from the trees. The sound of the river carried through the valley like a soft refrain. He felt lighter with each step, as though some invisible thread had loosened from his shoulders. He paused outside his shed. The door creaked open easily, though he hadn't touched it since the night of the fire. Dust floated in thin beams of light, and every tool, every wire, every mark of obsession seemed smaller now, just remnants of a man trying to hold infinity with his hands. He walked to the machine, touched its side, and whispered, "You did your part." He left the door open as he walked away. That evening, he sat again by the lake. The air was cool, filled with the soft hum of insects and the silver hush of water moving against stone. He didn't bring a jar this time. He brought the glass fragment. Setting it in his palm, he held it to the moonlight. It caught the glow and fractured it into 1,000 tiny reflections across his face. For a fleeting moment he thought he saw Clara's eyes among them, calm, endless, forgiving. He spoke to her softly, not asking for answers anymore, but offering something quieter. "You were right," he said. "It was never about the stars." A breeze rippled the lake, carrying the light across its surface. It shimmered and faded like breath on glass. He sat there until the night deepened, until the cold began to settle into his bones. Then he leaned back on the grass and closed his eyes, feeling the rhythm of the water match the slow beat of his heart. Above him, the sky stretched open, vast and unhurried. Stars bloomed like memories finding their way home. The fragment in his hand cooled, and the world seemed to exhale. Rick smiled faintly in the dark. The universe, he thought, didn't need saving. It only needed someone willing to listen. And so he listened. To the silence, to the lake, to the soft turning of time, until even the sound of his breath joined the great, gentle stillness of the night. The mornings had grown longer, filled with that slow light that brushed the valley like a whisper. Rick woke before sunrise, not out of urgency, but from a quiet awareness that the day would arrive whether he watched or not. He lingered in bed a while, listening to the faint hum of life, the wind threading through the trees, the distant rustle of the river, the soft creak of the old house settling into itself. The hum was no longer mechanical or alarming. It had become something like presence, something that belonged to him as much as the air he breathed. He rose and walked to the porch, the world unfolding gently beneath his feet. Mist hovered low across the fields, brushing the tips of the grass with silver dew. Each blade caught the morning light, trembling as though it had remembered the night before and held on to it. He carried the glass fragment from the lake in his palm, feeling its smooth edges warm under his fingers. It pulsed faintly, not like the jar, but like a heartbeat. Subtle, insistent, alive. As he sipped his tea, he he felt a pull he hadn't expected, a memory of Clara. Her voice, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. The memory didn't ache, it didn't demand. It simply existed like the echo of wind in the valley. He realized he hadn't sought her presence in weeks.
He hadn't needed to.
And yet, remembering her gave him a quiet warmth, a tether to everything he had once feared he'd lost. After breakfast, he wandered toward the old orchard behind the house. The trees had grown wild, their branches intertwined like careful hands. Rick ran his fingers along the rough bark, each knot and scar a testament to years of patient growth. He thought of the boy he had once been, the man he had once feared he might become. The orchard seemed to understand both. He knelt beneath an old apple tree, letting the cool earth touch his hands, and listened. For the first time, he didn't need answers. He only needed to hear. The glass fragment pulsed once, faintly, from his pocket. He took it out and held it toward the orchard, imagining it gathering the light of dawn and the memories of the trees themselves. A soft glow emanated, casting long, slow shadows across the grass. He imagined Clara standing beside him, smiling quietly. He whispered, "I hope you can see this," though he knew she didn't need to be present. The act itself, simple and unspoken, carried a weight that made him feel rooted, alive, and deeply human. Hours passed. Rick wandered the orchard, touching trees, lifting fallen leaves, and listening to the quiet conversation between wind and branch. He realized that the world had a rhythm he had only just begun to hear. The pulse of growth, the slow turning of seasons, the subtle dance between light and shadow. He thought of the jars, the machine, the portals, and understood that they were never about escape. They were about noticing, about holding on to the small, tender moments that might otherwise vanish. By afternoon, he found himself back at the lake. The water mirrored the sky, calm and patient, reflecting clouds that moved like memories, folding in on themselves. He knelt at the edge and set the glass fragment into the shallow water. It floated there, catching the last hints of sun, sending ripples that shimmered like liquid silver. He watched it for a long while, breathing with the rhythm of the waves, letting the quiet fill the spaces inside him he hadn't known were empty. He felt suddenly the absence of urgency. No portals to build, no universes to chase, no version of himself calling from the past or future. Only this, the lake, the orchard, the warmth of the day, the soft pulse of light in his hands. The simplicity of it was profound, almost miraculous in its ordinariness. As the sun lowered, he stood and walked along the shore, feeling the damp earth yield beneath his feet. Shadows stretched long and gentle, painting the trees, the water, and his own reflection in gold and violet. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called. Its song was neither urgent nor mournful, yet just present, just alive. He closed his eyes and let the sound move through him, carrying everything he had ever feared or hoped into the wide, patient world. When he returned home, the evening had deepened, folding the house into a calm, shadowed embrace. The jar on his desk remained dull, silent, yet he felt its memory resonate within him. He placed the glass fragment beside it, aligning it so the two objects shared the quiet of the room. He thought of Clara once more, and this time the thought didn't ache or demand.
It simply rested.
Night settled over the valley like soft cloth. Stars began to bloom, scattered and patient, each one holding the faint pulse of possibility. Rick stepped outside one last time, the cool air brushing against his face, carrying the scent of wet earth and night flowers. He sat on the porch steps, legs crossed, hands resting lightly on his knees. He closed his eyes and listened. Not for voices, not for instructions, not for answers, but for the small, infinite hum of the world. He breathed with it, letting the rhythm fill him. Each inhale brought memory, each exhale release. He thought of the jars, the machine, the boy, the lake, the orchard, the fragments of light he had followed and held. He realized he had learned something essential. Life did not need to be rewritten to be meaningful. It only needed to be noticed, held, and respected in its quiet unfolding. And as the stars deepened, as the wind whispered across the fields, Rick let himself fall backward onto the steps. The glass fragment glimmered faintly beside him, a memory of light and presence. He gazed upward at the vast night sky and whispered, "I am here. I am listening." The air, the water, the earth, and the quiet pulse of life around him seemed to answer. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of sight, a fragment of the universe smiled gently, acknowledging the man who had finally learned to rest inside it. The valley had grown softer, quieter, as if it too had learned to breathe in tandem with him. Rick woke that morning to a sky washed pale with dawn, the mist curling low across the fields like slow ribbons of memory. He lingered at the window for a long while, watching dew collect on the grass and the faint shimmer of light spill across the orchard. Each movement of the world felt deliberate, thoughtful, as though the earth itself were teaching him patience. He dressed slowly and stepped outside. The air was cool, carrying faint scents of pine and earth, hints of the river still distant but audible in its gentle hum. The glass fragment from the lake was in his pocket, heavy in a comforting way. He held it briefly in his palm, feeling the subtle pulse of warmth that had grown almost like a heartbeat. It was no longer a guide, no longer a message. It was a companion, quiet, reliable, subtle. Rick wandered through the orchard, hands brushing against the rough bark of the trees. Each trunk held a story of seasons past, each knot a memory of wind and rain. The ground was soft beneath his feet, littered with fallen petals and small fruits, their colors muted by the morning mist. He paused beneath an ancient apple tree, one whose branches stretched wide as though holding the sky. Here, in the stillness, he let himself breathe fully, the rhythm of his chest echoing the slow pulse of life around him. He found a stone bench beneath the tree and sat. The sun had begun its slow ascent, illuminating the orchard with soft golden light. Shadows stretched and recoiled as if they were alive, playful yet calm. Rick closed his eyes, letting the warmth of the sun and the earth press gently into him. The quiet was not empty. It was full of echoes. The faintest laughter, the memory of Clara's hand brushing his arm, the soft hum of the machine in the shed, long since silenced. The glass fragment glimmered faintly in his hand. It had changed, or perhaps he had changed, and now its light reflected not urgency or longing, but reflection itself. He traced the edges with a fingertip, imagining it holding not a universe to control, but a single moment, suspended in care. The pulse of warmth grew steady, calming, and Rick felt it extend into his chest, into the quiet spaces he hadn't known were waiting. Hours drifted. He wandered down the narrow path toward the river, letting his thoughts stretch with the bending light. The water flowed slow and certain, reflecting sky and trees with a calm insistence. Rick knelt at the edge, tracing the ripples with his fingers. The current whispered against his skin, as though offering the same lesson the valley had been teaching. Presence matters more than motion, attention more than control. He thought of Clara, of the boy, of the jars, and felt a profound gratitude settle like soft soil beneath him. A soft rustle behind him drew his attention. A fox, slender and copper-colored, emerged from the underbrush. It paused, observing him with cautious curiosity. Rick remained still, hands resting lightly on the riverbank. The fox approached, sniffed the water, and glanced at him again before disappearing into the reeds. The encounter was brief, ordinary, yet it held something deeper. The sense that life, in all its forms, could coexist quietly without disturbance. a balance that didn't require interference.
Only respect. Rick lingered by the river until the sun climbed higher,
Painting the valley in broad strokes of gold. He picked a smooth stone from the edge, rolling it between his fingers. Then he released it into the water. The ripple expanded slowly, carrying his gesture across the mirrored surface. He realized that the act was not about impact or result. It was about attention, about marking presence, about connecting with the flow of life around him. By late afternoon, he returned to the shed. The machine sat inert, covered lightly with dust, yet it seemed smaller, almost intimate in its stillness. Rick touched the surface gently, not to awaken it, not to command it, but simply to acknowledge it. The jars, the fragments of light, the echoes of all he had sought and lost and found. They had taught him something essential. Power without care is hollow, but care, quietly practiced, is eternal. The day waned, the sky folding from gold to soft violet. Rick stepped outside once more, carrying the glass fragment. He walked to the orchard clearing, kneeling in the soft grass, and held the fragment to the fading light. Its pulse was faint, a gentle rhythm he could feel rather than see. He whispered softly, not to anyone in particular, but to the memory of all he had loved and all that had guided him. Thank you. Night fell gradually, carrying stars that shimmered with patience and quiet understanding. Rick sat beneath the trees, eyes tracing constellations that seemed to respond with delicate tremors in the glass fragment. He felt a sense of continuity, a tether not to past regrets or future anxieties, but to the enduring pulse of life itself. Every breath, every heartbeat, every ripple in the water seemed part of a larger rhythm, and he was finally in tune. He leaned back, letting the cool grass press against his skin, and closed his eyes. The valley exhaled with him. The stars pulsed faintly. The wind whispered through leaves. Somewhere, perhaps in memory or dream, Clara smiled. The glass fragment rested warm in his hand, carrying the soft glow of understanding,
of patience, of presence, and in that moment,
Rick allowed himself to simply be held by the valley, by the orchard, by the quiet pulse of life. He let the world breathe around him, and for the first time in so many years, he did not need to chase or fix or escape. He only needed to feel. The night stretched on, infinite and patient, until the stars themselves seemed to bow in recognition of his stillness. And there, beneath the vast expanse, Rick surrendered to it fully, listening to the rhythm of the world, feeling its gentle heartbeat mirror his own. Dawn arrived slow and deliberate, spilling pale light across the valley like honey dripped over silver. Rick woke to it quietly, as though the world had leaned close to whisper in his ear. He lingered a moment beneath the covers, feeling the rhythm of the morning seep into his body. The slow creak of the house settling, the distant rush of the river, the soft, steady rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. Each sound was a note in a quiet symphony he had learned to hear only now. He rose and dressed with care, moving with the deliberate slowness of someone who no longer had to chase anything. The glass fragment rested in his pocket, its pulse faint and steady, warm against his palm. He stepped outside, the air cool and fragrant, carrying hints of dew and the distant orchards beyond the fields. The valley seemed awake, yet patient, as if it had waited for him to notice it fully. Rick wandered along the path toward the river, feeling the earth soft beneath his boots. Each step pressed into memory. Not the mechanical, desperate memory of equations and inventions, but the quiet, layered memory of life itself. He paused often, listening. The wind through reeds, the gentle rush of water over stone, the faint, distant calls of birds awakening. He imagined Clara's voice in the wind, gentle and certain, guiding him not toward something new, but toward himself. At the river, he knelt at the edge, letting the water brush his fingers. The surface reflected the sky in perfect clarity. Pale blue, streaked with the first hints of gold. Rick held the glass fragment above the water. The light it emitted was subtle, almost shy, but it scattered across the ripples in gentle, intricate patterns. For a long moment he traced the movement of the reflections, letting them fold into one another like layers of thought made soft. He remembered the boy who had appeared once at the orchard, holding the fragment and telling him to remember without needing to change what came next. That lesson had taken root. The glass, once a guide, a signal, a fragment of some otherworldly design, was now simply a companion. It pulsed with the quiet of acknowledgement, of presence, of acceptance. Rick felt his chest expand with the realization that some things were meant only to be witnessed, not controlled. He stayed by the river for hours, letting time unfold without interference. He observed the tiny insects skimming the water, the fish darting beneath the surface, the way shadows moved slowly across stones and grass. Each motion carried no urgency, no demand, only existence. The world, he understood, had rhythms that required nothing but attention. And in that attention, in that presence, he discovered a subtle kind of magic more profound than any machine he had built. The magic of being alive fully, quietly, completely. By midday, he walked back toward the orchard. The trees had grown taller, their branches more intertwined, their roots reaching deep into the earth. Rick touched the bark of each, feeling the cool roughness, the hidden warmth beneath. He whispered softly, not for Clara, not for the boy, not for any observer, only for himself. "I see you. I am here." The trees swayed gently as if acknowledging him, leaves trembling in response. He paused beneath the largest apple tree, letting sunlight warm his face. He closed his eyes and inhaled the faint perfume of blossoms and earth. It was a scent that carried the slow march of time, the quiet assurance of life repeating itself, forgiving itself, enduring. He understood then that growth did not demand triumph. It demanded patience, attention, and love, often silent, often unrecognized, yet always profound. Afternoon folded toward evening, bringing soft shadows and the amber light of a lowering sun. Rick carried the glass fragment to the clearing near the lake, placing it carefully on the grass. Its light shimmered faintly in the twilight, mingling with the gold of the sun, casting long, intricate patterns across the earth. He watched for a long time as the light danced, reflecting and refracting, and felt a calm settle deep in his bones. He thought of Clara, of the jars, of the machines, and of the boy. He thought of every fragment of his past that had once seemed urgent, terrifying, impossible. Now all of it had been gathered, folded into quiet memory. He realized that life's meaning was never in the chasing, never in the breaking, never in the controlling. It was in the witnessing, in the tending, in the small, patient acts of care that created bridges between moments, people, and self. Night fell fully. The stars bloomed slowly overhead, steady and patient. Rick leaned back on the grass, eyes tracing constellations he had long ago tried to map with logic and equations. Each star seemed alive, a small heartbeat in the vast quiet. The fragment beside him pulsed softly in tandem, as if agreeing with the rhythm of the universe and his own heart. He closed his eyes, letting the night and the valley enfold him. The river whispered. The wind rustled the trees. Somewhere, perhaps in memory, perhaps in dream, Clara's presence lingered, warm, patient, and forgiving. Rick exhaled fully, feeling the slow release of tension he hadn't realized he'd carried for decades. The world held him in its quiet pulse, and for the first time, he did not want to leave. He whispered softly, not to anyone, but to everything. I am here.
I see, I feel, I am enough. And in that gentle declaration,
Beneath the infinite patient stars, Rick allowed himself to rest completely, listening to the rhythm of life echoing through river, orchard, and valley alike. The dawn arrived slow and golden, brushing the valley with a gentle warmth that made the dew on the grass glitter like scattered starlight. Rick woke with the faint scent of earth and rain lingering in the air, a quiet reminder that the world continued to breathe while he slept. He sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the weight of calm settle into him. The valley outside shimmered faintly, as though even the landscape had learned to move with patience, in no hurry to announce itself. He dressed and stepped outside, letting the cool air brush against his face. The orchard stretched out before him, shadows stretching long across the soft earth. Each tree stood like a silent sentinel, branches cradling the early light, leaves trembling slightly in the morning breeze. Rick moved through them slowly, fingers grazing the rough bark, feeling the subtle pulse of life beneath. It was a rhythm he had come to understand, a quiet heartbeat that asked nothing, demanded nothing, yet offered everything to those willing to listen. The glass fragment rested in his pocket, warm against his palm, a reminder that even the smallest piece of light could carry meaning. Rick walked toward the lake, letting the path curve through fields flecked with wildflowers and soft grasses. The river's distant murmur guided him, a constant yet unobtrusive presence that wove itself into the day. Each step he took felt deliberate but unforced, like a conversation with the land itself, quiet but full of unspoken understanding. By the lake, the water mirrored the sky with perfect clarity, pale blue streaked with the first hints of gold. Rick knelt at the edge, tracing the surface with his fingertips, watching ripples expand and fold back into themselves. The glass fragment caught the light, scattering delicate patterns across the water, and he felt a warmth spread through his chest. This was not the mechanical pulse of his past creations, nor the urgent brilliance of the jars. It was something gentler, quieter, infinitely more human. He let the fragment float on the water's surface, observing it as it drifted slowly, tracing soft curves along the shoreline. Time seemed to stretch, unbound by clocks or schedules. The wind whispered through the reeds, carrying faint echoes of memory. Clara's laughter, the hum of the machine, the boy's quiet advice to remember without altering what comes next. Rick felt the weight of years dissolve in that moment, leaving only presence, observation, and the soft, steady pulse of life. Hours passed, unnoticed and uncounted. Rick explored the edge of the lake, feeling the damp grass under his hands and the cool brush of water against his skin. He noticed small details he had once overlooked, the delicate veins of a fallen leaf, the shimmer of a dragonfly's wings, the intricate patterns formed by sunlight through water. Each moment held a quiet gravity, an invisible significance, not demanding attention, but offering it freely to anyone willing to receive. He wandered back to the orchard as afternoon crept over the valley, stretching shadows longer, painting the leaves in gold and violet. The trees whispered softly as he passed, branches brushing against each other in a language he felt rather than understood. Rick paused beneath a wide apple tree, resting his hand against its trunk, and whispered softly to himself, "I see you. I am here. I remember." The acknowledgement was unnecessary, yet somehow essential, like the act of exhaling after holding one's breath too long. He found a stone bench beneath the largest tree and sat, letting the sun warm his face. Rick closed his eyes and breathed slowly, the air rich with scent of flowers and earth. The glass fragment pulsed faintly in his hand, steady and gentle, echoing the rhythm of his own heartbeat. For a long while, he simply sat, witnessing the quiet symphony of life around him. Birds calling to one another, insects skimming across the surface of ponds, wind moving through grass and branches with delicate insistence. Evening approached with a soft gradient of color, fading gold into lavender. Rick rose and returned to the lake, kneeling at its edge to set the glass fragment on the shallow water. Its glow scattered across the ripples, catching the last hints of sun and refracting them into tiny arcs of light that danced across the surface. He watched until the colors softened, merging into the reflective calm of the night. The act held no purpose beyond observation, no hope beyond appreciation, yet it carried a profound resonance. Night deepened, and the stars appeared one by one, patient, steadfast, each a quiet beacon in the vast dark. Rick lay on the grass, glass fragment beside him, and felt the pulse of the universe align gently with his own. The wind whispered through the orchard, carrying faint memories of Clara, of the boy, of all the moments that had led him here. Each pulse, each ripple, each breath seemed a reminder that presence mattered more than control. That witness held more power than invention. Rick closed his eyes, letting the valley enfold him, allowing the rhythm of life to pulse through his being. The river, the lake, the orchard, the wind and the stars all moved in quiet agreement, teaching him the slow, patient language of existence. Somewhere in the threads of memory and light, Clara's smile lingered, calm, forgiving, and warm. He exhaled fully, releasing decades of tension, fear, and expectation, and let the soft pulse of life carry him into rest. And there, beneath the infinite night sky, Rick surrendered fully to the quiet, patient rhythm of the world, listening deeply to the heartbeat of the valley, of the stars, and of himself. The dawn arrived slowly, pale and deliberate, spilling across the valley like soft linen draped over the earth. Rick woke beneath the muted light, hearing first the delicate murmur of the river, then the faint rustle of leaves in the orchard, and finally, the soft rhythm of his own breath. He lay still for a long moment, allowing the quiet to settle fully into him, a presence so patient it felt like the valley itself was holding him. He rose with gentle care, stepping outside into the cool morning. The air was moist with dew and rich with the faint perfume of blossoms. Each blade of grass shimmered, tiny jewels kissed by the sun. Rick carried the glass fragment in his hand, its pulse slow and warm, a rhythm that matched his own. He felt neither urgency nor expectation, only the soft, persistent awareness that life moved with or without him, and his role was simply to notice. He wandered toward the lake, feet brushing through the dew-laden grass. The path wound through orchards and fields, each step an unspoken conversation with the world. The orchard trees leaned gently into the morning light, their branches brushing softly against each other, whispering a language only the heart could comprehend. Rick's fingers grazed the bark as he passed, sensing decades of growth and patience embedded in each knot and branch. At the lake, the water lay still, reflecting the sky in perfect clarity. Rick knelt at the edge, letting his fingers ripple the surface. The glass fragment floated briefly in his palm before he set it on the water. Its soft glow scattered into delicate patterns refracted by gentle ripples. He watched the shifting light, mesmerized not by spectacle, but by the slow unfolding of small, intricate details. Every reflection, every shimmer, every wave seemed alive, a quiet mirror of his own heart. He stayed there for hours, listening. The birds called softly from distant trees, insects skimmed the water's surface, and a faint wind threaded through the reeds. Rick realized he no longer sought knowledge or control, no longer feared loss or failure. Presence alone was a kind of mastery, the ability to witness without interference, to exist fully in the delicate moment without demanding more than it could give. The sun climbed, spilling gold across the valley, and Rick wandered toward the orchard again. He paused beneath the largest apple tree, feeling the warmth of sunlight along his face and the roughness of bark beneath his hand. He whispered softly to the tree, to the orchard, to the valley itself, "I see you."
I am here. There was no need for an answer.
The acknowledgement itself carried a quiet fulfillment, a shared understanding between life and observer. He found a stone bench beneath the tree and sat. His gaze followed the wind as it stirred the branches, brushed petals from bloom to ground, and carried scents of earth and rain. The glass fragment pulsed gently in his hand, a subtle reminder that even the smallest piece of light could hold meaning when attention was given. He held it to the sun briefly, watching as its glow fractured across the grass in tiny, intricate arcs. The warmth radiated into him, a quiet companion, neither voice nor instruction, only presence. Afternoon fell slowly. Rick wandered along the riverbank, letting the water ripple past his fingers. The river was patient, carrying leaves and light downstream without hurry. He thought of Clara, of the boy, of the jars and fragments of light, and understood fully that the essence of life lay not in seeking, but in attending, in noticing the small, quiet miracles that unfolded endlessly around him. Each breath, each ripple, each pulse of the fragment seemed a dialogue between him and the world, subtle but profound. By evening, the sky deepened to violet and gold. Rick returned to the lake, kneeling at the edge to place the glass fragment on the water's surface once more. Its glow shimmered against the dimming sky, reflecting in tiny ripples that carried light across the stillness. He watched, letting the delicate patterns imprint themselves in memory. There was no need to capture, control, or understand. Observation itself was enough, a quiet act of love for the world and its infinite smallness. The night fell fully, and stars bloomed overhead, patient, distant, eternal. Rick lay back on the grass, the glass fragment warm beside him, and felt the rhythm of the valley pulse in harmony with his own heartbeat. The wind whispered softly through the orchard, through reeds, through the night itself, carrying echoes of Clara's presence, the boy's advice, the quiet lessons of every moment lived fully. Rick exhaled slowly, releasing tension and worry that had lingered unspoken for decades. He let the valley hold him, let the night carry him, let the river and the wind and the trees remind him that the world had patience for those willing to listen. The glass fragment pulsed faintly, a subtle heartbeat in the vastness of night. He closed his eyes and let the quiet seep fully into him, letting every pulse, every breath, every ripple dissolve the last remnants of longing and fear. Somewhere in the infinite dark, the stars shimmered faintly in acknowledgement. Somewhere, in the soft pulse of memory and presence, Clara's smile lingered, calm and forgiving. Rick whispered into the night, not to be heard, but simply to exist fully. I am here.
I see, I feel.
I am enough. And in that gentle surrender, beneath the patient, infinite sky, Rick allowed himself to rest fully, listening to the heartbeat of the valley, the lake,
and the universe itself. The morning came soft,
diffused light spilling across the valley like gentle brush strokes. Rick stirred slowly, feeling the quiet pull of the day settle into his bones. He remained for a long moment beneath the covers, listening to the subtle symphony of the world waking, the river's low murmur, the orchard leaves brushing together in mild conversation, the distant call of a bird yet to fully stretch its wings. He did not rise immediately. He let the calm cradle him, savoring its patient weight, letting it root him in the present. When he did step outside, the air was cool and fragrant, carrying hints of damp earth and faint blossoms from the orchard. Each blade of grass glistened with dew, trembling lightly under the pale morning sun. Rick carried the glass fragment in his hand, now familiar and almost intimate, its warmth pulsing softly as though it knew the rhythm of his heart. He walked through the orchard slowly, fingers brushing along bark. lingering over knots and crevices that had weathered countless seasons. He paused beneath the largest apple tree,
stretching his arms wide as though he could touch the sky through the branches.
The sun spilled over him in quiet streams, illuminating dust motes that danced lazily in the morning air. Rick closed his eyes, inhaling the deep scent of earth and leaves, of water and sky, and for a long while simply allowed himself to exist in the tender balance of life. The valley was patient, forgiving, and he at last was patient with himself. After a while, he made his way to the river. The water was slow and steady, carrying with it the reflection of trees and sky in perfect serenity. He knelt at the edge and let his fingers graze the surface, watching tiny ripples scatter outward, touching everything without force. The glass fragment glimmered faintly, resting lightly in his palm, and Rick marveled at how something so small could feel so vital, so present, a quiet companion in the stillness of the world. He lingered there, absorbing the rhythms of the river, the wind through the reeds, the faint murmur of insects. He thought of Clara, of the boy, of the jars and the fragments of light that had guided him, and felt a deep gratitude, quiet and unspoken. Life was not about urgency, about mastery, about control. It was about presence, witnessing, attending to the subtle miracle of every moment. And in that awareness, he felt a profound release, a letting go that had been decades in coming. Rick walked slowly back through the orchard, each step deliberate, savoring the feel of soft earth beneath his boots. He paused often, touching bark, letting light brush his face, listening to the gentle sounds of the valley around him. He whispered to the trees, to the grass, to the river beyond, "I see you. I am here. I am listening." No answer was needed. The acknowledgement itself carried a quiet, profound resonance. By afternoon, the sun had climbed higher, casting long, warm shadows across the fields. Rick returned to the lake and knelt at its edge. The water lay still, reflecting the sky in calm perfection. He placed the glass fragment gently on the surface, watching as it caught the sunlight and scattered delicate patterns across the ripples. The motion was slow, subtle, and mesmerizing. He observed it for a long time, letting the soft dance of light and water fold into his mind and heart, carrying with it the quiet lessons of patience, care, and presence. Evening fell gradually, painting the sky in muted purples and golds. Rick wandered to a flat stone by the lake, sitting and allowing the wind to brush against his face. The glass fragment rested beside him, its pulse soft, like a heartbeat in the darkening air. The valley seemed to exhale with him. The river rippled softly, the orchard swayed gently, and the first stars appeared overhead, patient and steadfast. Rick leaned back on the stone, closing his eyes. He listened to the night, to the river, the wind, the trees, the distant hum of life, and felt the quiet continuity of existence. Somewhere in memory, in dream, in the faint pulse of the fragment, Clara's presence lingered, calm, warm, forgiving. He exhaled fully, releasing the remnants of fear, of longing, of the need to control, to fix, to understand. The world held him, steady and unyielding, yet gentle in its patient embrace. He whispered softly, not to anyone, but to the valley, to the lake, to the night sky, "I am here.
I see, I feel. I am enough." The stars above seemed to shimmer in acknowledgement, faint and steady.
The glass fragment pulsed in quiet agreement, reflecting the rhythm of the universe, the pulse of life itself. And as the night deepened, Rick let himself rest fully, letting the valley, the orchard, the river, and the soft, infinite sky carry him into a calm, enduring peace. The pulse of the fragment and the heartbeat of the valley moved in harmony with his own. The lessons of decades, patience, presence, care, and quiet attention, were now not only understood, but lived. And somewhere in the far reaches of memory and the soft light of the stars, he felt a deep sense of belonging.
No chasing, no fleeing, no endless searching. Only presence, only being.
Only the gentle, persistent rhythm of life carrying him. Softly, fully, endlessly, he exhaled once more, letting every fragment of worry, regret, and expectation dissolve into the night, and whispered, "Thank you for being here with me." The valley, the lake, the trees, the stars, and even the quiet pulse of the glass fragment seemed to answer in their own way. Rick closed his eyes completely, leaning back on the soft earth, and surrendered fully to the night, the valley, and the enduring rhythm of existence. Here, beneath the infinite, patient sky, he finally understood the quiet magic of life. It was never about conquest, only attention, and with that, he let the world hold him. The morning light was soft, spilling across the valley in thin golden threads that seemed almost to hover above the earth. Rick woke slowly, the quiet of the house pressing gently against him, comforting in its patience. He lingered in bed a while, feeling the rhythm of the world seep into his chest, the river's distant hum, the whisper of leaves in the orchard, the subtle shift of air against walls and floorboards. He rose when it felt right, not because the day demanded it, but because he wanted to move within it deliberately, tenderly. Outside, the air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and blossoms from the orchard. Rick felt each inhalation, letting it fill his chest and sink into his bones. The valley lay spread before him, soft hills folding into gentle shadows, light spilling over trees and fields with unhurried certainty. He carried the glass fragment in his palm, its pulse faint but insistent, a quiet echo of presence. It was a companion now, not a guide, not a signal, merely a reminder that light could persist even in stillness. He wandered through the orchard, fingers brushing bark and leaves, noticing every nuance. The subtle color of moss along a trunk, the gentle sway of a branch in the wind, the delicate scent of a blossom carried by the breeze. The orchard had grown familiar, intimate, each tree and root and fallen leaf a reflection of the patience and attention he had cultivated in himself. Rick's steps were slow, deliberate, each one a small act of gratitude for the rhythm of life that had quietly endured alongside him. At the lake, the water lay perfectly still, mirroring sky and trees with flawless serenity. Rick knelt at its edge, letting his fingers ripple the surface. He placed the glass fragment on the water, watching as its soft glow spread into faint arcs across the ripples. The motion was gentle, intimate, a quiet dance of light and water, and Rick felt himself fold into it completely, body and mind attuned to the rhythm of the world around him. He thought of Clara, of the boy, of the fragments of light, and the jars that had once held urgency and fear. Each memory was softened now, filtered through years of patience, observation, and acceptance. The lessons he had carried for so long, the importance of noticing, the quiet power of presence, the gentle persistence of care, were no longer abstract. They lived in him, breathed in his chest, pulsed with the fragment in his hand. Hours passed unnoticed. Rick wandered along the riverbank, feeling the soft earth beneath his feet, listening to the delicate whispers of wind through grass and reeds. Birds called intermittently, insects skimmed the water, and the occasional leaf floated gently downstream. Each movement was a reminder that life was composed not of grand gestures, but of small, attentive moments. The valley, in its patient unfolding, had taught him this truth better than any machine, any invention, any universe he had once tried to command. Afternoon, the sun had climbed higher, spilling gold across the orchard and the fields beyond. Rick returned to the stone bench beneath the largest apple tree. He sat and let the light wash over him, feeling the warmth, sink into his skin, his muscles, his bones. The glass fragment pulsed faintly in his palm, a quiet companion, and he let his thoughts drift. He did not chase answers or clarity. He did not need resolution. He simply witnessed the world, and in doing so, witnessed himself. Evening approached with a soft, fading glow. Rick carried the fragment back to the lake, kneeling at the edge to place it gently on the water's surface. Its light shimmered in the dimming sun, scattering in delicate patterns that rippled across the surface. He watched until the glow softened, until the reflections merged with the calm of the lake, until the motion of light and water became a lullaby that touched something deep within him. Night fell fully, bringing stars that glimmered with quiet patience. Rick lay on the soft grass by the lake, the fragment resting beside him. The wind whispered through the trees, across the water, through the valley itself, carrying echoes of memories and lessons learned. Clara's presence lingered, soft and forgiving, the boy's advice woven into the pulse of life. The jars and fragments of light transformed into understanding and care. Rick exhaled slowly, releasing all tension, all expectation, all lingering shadows of fear or regret. He allowed himself to be held completely by the valley, the lake, the orchard, and the soft, infinite sky. The fragment pulsed gently, echoing the rhythm of the stars and the river and the wind. He closed his eyes fully, letting the quiet of the night settle into him, a gentle, enduring embrace. He whispered softly, not to be heard, but to exist fully. I am here.
I see, I feel, I am enough. The valley, the lake, the trees, the stars, and the fragment seem to answer in their own way, a silent chorus of presence and understanding.
Rick let himself surrender fully to it, feeling the rhythm of the world pulse through him. And as the night deepened, as the wind moved through the orchard and the river rippled softly, he understood at last that life's magic was never in control or conquest. It was in attention, in presence, in the small, quiet acts that allowed light to persist in the midst of darkness. And somewhere, beyond sight and memory, he felt the soft, enduring acknowledgement of everything he had loved and lost, of every lesson, every fragment of light, every heartbeat that had carried him to this moment. Rick let himself rest fully, carried by the infinite rhythm of the valley, the orchard, the river, the stars, and the soft pulse of life itself. And with that, he stretched into the quiet, patient sky, held by the valley, by the lake, by the enduring rhythm of existence.